Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Let's dive into today's conversation regarding life's myriad transitions and how we refine our responses in our relationships, our wellness, our households, our work, and in our practices. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a return guest today, one of my favorite humans, the author first of Pause, Rest, Be, and Gather, and now the author of Rest is Sacred. This is Octavia Faith Ann Raheem. So happy to have you back, Octavia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You are a wife, a mother, an author. Okay. Your bio also calls you a rest coach, restorative yoga nidra teacher, founder of Devoted to Rest, which is an incredible transformational rest-focused immersion for visionary leaders, which I think is very important. You really take great pride and care to point out that the rest that you take and teach is really for the people who are closest to you, and that is, in your heart, that's what defines you. And I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to read the rest of your bio just because it's interesting, and whoever might be listening might be interested in knowing that you also teach passionate and driven individuals how to awaken their fullest potential through the power of rest. You've got 10,000 plus hours of training and teaching experience. You are, in our eyes, a true luminary in the areas of rest and restorative arts, wellness, and yoga. And you've been featured in all sorts of places, from the New York Times to Tricycle. But really the important part is that you're doing a great job as a mom, as a partner. And you've lost both of your parents, so I'd like to talk about that. And then I'll get into reading from the book and checking in with you on your intention and also my own experience. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your parents, losing them both, and what that meant to you.
I'm like, how much time do we have?
I know that feeling.
Well, I'll say I didn't know that I wasn't grown until I had to grow up. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when your parents are not here, I feel like I know what it means to be like a speck of sand, like an ant and a giant all at once. And that's just the polarity and dynamic nature of what I believed who tethered me to earth is not within earth anymore. And there's some distance, not very much, but some distance between the losses. And what I think about, feel into a lot these days is, what does it mean to be the daughter of spirits? And my parents were both deeply spiritual people, profoundly complicated in the way humans can be. When you see me, I believe and know and trust you see and feel the best of who they were. They got me here and then they split, like that's just an interesting thing to me, that I'm like, they could come together and bring me here, and then they walk their separate paths. And a most profound initiation I've had is walking my mother to the spirit door, to like being right by her side, like being in the room with someone as they leave. Is There are no words. And it's been in my mom's transition in particular that the abiding, nourishing, non-judgmental, and deeply compassionate power of a rest practice has been very clear to me. One of my teachers and sisters and friends Tracy Stanley, she taught me, she's like, Nidra is the great mother, is the goddess. And when my physical mother was not here, one of the only places of any fraction of sanity and solace I was able to find in the first, days, weeks, months, year was in on the floor in a rest nest, as we call it, just like lots of blankets and pillows, in one really particular practice called Soma Nidra, which is like a moon-based yoga nidra practice. And even before the passage of both my parents, I would rest and like hear ancestral whispers or remember something that was so much older than me. And I thought I was making it up until like I have recent ancestors and I'm like, oh, when I rest, you're right there. Like you're clearly right here, right within me and in a myriad of cosmic ways. And there's something more available to me in that stillness and that quiet. So I think you said, well, tell me about your parents.
Hmm.
And I can say when you're reading me, right, or you're hearing me, you're hearing some of their cadence, you're hearing their rhythm, and you are experiencing in me the brilliance, liberation, equity, and justice that the times they were born in did not grant them. I am their wildest dream, and both my work in the world and my rest is a part of their dreams being fulfilled.
Yeah. I just need to let that hang there for a moment because that's true for every person of color
Mm,
everywhere.
hmm.
That's the dream.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
you're so welcome.
I want to start at the end. I've decided I want to read the closing first.
I like to start at the end. I did that with my last book.
You
With Pause Rest V, I started with the ending.
right. You did, right.
Yeah.
This is called Moving Forward. We are at a critical moment in our collective history. The world is on fire. And here I am, writing about rest, inviting you to rest. While writing, I wondered if you think, she's calling me into a burning house and telling me to lay down. True. There is a fire. Have you slowed down enough to ask who and what tends to the insufferable fire, expanding its reach and devastating impact? What systems, conditions, and repetitive patterns feed the monstrous blaze, and what starves it? These questions were my companions as I wrote the prayers, poems, and reflections in this book, you write. And I want to interrupt and say, what starves it is rest. Here you continue. Rest is sacred. Yet, is it enough for where you are right now? Is it enough for where we collectively are right now? Is it the holy water we need to extinguish the fire? Here's what I know. You conclude. Rest is a start. It's an invitation to get out of the burning house before it or we completely collapse. It is the soothing siren to wake up before it all falls down. It is a portal to envision a gateway to a safe harbor. Most of all, I know that rest is a healing salve with brilliant regenerative power, and we need that kind of anointed power right now. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When I first opened the book, the subtitle of Rest is Sacred, our listener, is Reclaiming Our Brilliance Through the Practice of Stillness. And egotistically, I was like, ooh, reclaiming our brilliance. Maybe I can get some of that back. I've been noticing my brain is a little shaky right now.
Hmm.
I have a lot of change happening.
Hmm.
And the first time I opened it was to page 40, 1.24. I'll read it, it's short. You wore chains of external success, a rare metal around your neck, pretty lockets that kept you striving to prove your worth until Longing for new ways, you finally woke up and rested. Rest, unhooked one link, then another, then another. Rest and get free. So the first time I read that, I cried. I'm in the middle of a transition myself of letting go of titles, expenditures, budgets, extras, so that I can serve, so that I can do the work. I'm in chaplaincy training. I'm just ready. I'm ready to let go of a lot of stuff, materially and figuratively. And I read this and I thought, wow, I wonder what Octavia is going through. If that's what this means to me, what does it mean to you? Like, this is big for me.
I think we've all saw the chains and go, I want that. We didn't call them chains though, you know? It's like some things that once we have it in our hand or around our wrist, we realize that's not a bracelet. That is in fact some type of bondage. But I want to tell you something about how I wrote this book and what might be causing it to feel how it feels is I would write names of people I know and love. Some of them really close and intimate, some in the wider culture, right? Like maybe someone we all admire, like as a celebrity or a singer. And I do my rest practice. And then I'd say, what do I want to say to them about rest just from my observation of them? And then I took the names off. So I'm saying that to say like it's personal and this was written to someone that like now there's no name on it other than like the collective and part of it was just from watching and feeling and also being a human and chasing things that once I got into the room I'm like, well this feels like a cell with a someone else has the lock and I don't know how to get out of this, right? So it's a little bit of both and like I'm writing to a real life human. Like it wasn't abstract. It was like, dear you, I'm watching in the way that I watch. I'm experiencing in the way that I experience. And I've also been you. So it's like the both and it's not like I'm trying to tell you, look at what you're doing. I'm like, I can see what you're doing because I've done it and I'm untangling myself from it. And really just the reclaiming your brilliance is, I think this might be a Danielle Laporte question from one of her early truth bomb decks is, well, who were you before the world told you who you were supposed to be? And I'm like, it's a simple seeming question now. And years ago when I encountered it, I was like, what I'm supposed to answer that, because I was just like, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be this. I should do this. I was really out of touch with what's actually motivating me to move and work and do in the way that I am. It was not coming from the inside. It was really being defined by some external committee, that I maybe nameless, maybe not. And so I guess to answer your question, part of what I was feeling was like, well, this is a love note to someone. I could probably go back through all my notes and be like, oh, that's whose name was on that. And then it was a love note because I'm like, I'm speaking to you from someone who's untangling, unbinding, being unlocked from so much as I rest. And the thing about rest practice that I find initially I found unnerving and now I find deeply comforting is that rest is not concerned with who you are, what you are, how you are. Like, if rest could speak to us, and I guess it does, but if it speaks to us, it's just saying, come here and rest, not and prove that you're worth. Like rest does not care, right? Like I don't need to be anything or anyone to lay down. The practice of rest, if I'm personifying it, and it's also why I'm like, it's a deeply spiritual practice because rest is just like, come here, let me hold you. And remember, like, how that feels and what that is, and that I don't need you to do anything. I don't need you to read my bio. I don't even need you to have one. What rest wants of us is just to come accept the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel seen. And I feel like a lot of people will feel seen reading that part, especially about the pretty lockets, like, the little pictures that you're keeping that define you. Open this up and see, this is who I am. This is who I am.
And I can tell you, as I'm a dream chaser, goal setter kind of person that's being refined within me. I don't know if you've had this experience where you were chasing a dream, you arrived at the dream, and you were so radically transformed from the journey to get there that it was maybe a little nightmarish, and so some of that is like to know that something is now binding means I also engage the process. And I guess what I'm also speaking to, I know what I'm also speaking to is what we do to get in a room and then just get into the room and are completely disappointed, by whatever is occurring in it, whether it's like the food doesn't taste good on a simple level, or just we do so much to navigate to a place and a point that we think is going to make us free and realize it's a trap, I've done that more than a time or two.
Yeah, and to answer your question, I do know what that's like to, have a dream, to get there and be like, "Who is this person? Who is this? How did I get here?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. To this point on page 66, 2.6, remember to rest before you need to.
Mhm.
You write, a dream about a dear friend woke me up to how much we are disconnected from rest. In the dream, I learned that a friend was in the ICU at a hospital far away from her home after collapsing during a work trip. I instantly rushed to be by her bedside in the dream, and when I entered the hospital room, she was sitting at the bed with the most peaceful smile on her wide eyed face. I ran to her, held her hands, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Why are you smiling? You're in the hospital, in the ICU, no less." And she kept smiling and said, "Don't you understand? No one can bother me here. No one can request anything from me here. My to do list has no precedent here." And there was more that she said, basically, all she's here to do is get her heart checked and make sure she drinks water and is fed. And she rests and is intensely cared for in the intensive care unit. In the dream, you write, I responded, there has to be a better way to access rest and care that doesn't include illness, injury, or some other kind of life altering experience that forces you to finally stop and rest. She replied, that sounds true. I don't trust this right now, and I don't know how.
Mhm.
After that dream, you called your friend. Through tears, she said, Sis, you always know. I received this message. And right then, the two of you rested together and you began to create a rest and care plan that was in harmony with her very real, ostensibly busy life. And you thought of the power, you go on a little later in the piece, the power of individual and collective rest. You took the words intensive care out of the medical frame. This is what really drew me in here. And you asked, what would one act of intensive and collective care look like right now? It's so good. Like, that's exactly intensive care. We all need intensive care right now. The message is also a vital signs check. Are you hydrated? Are you being nourished right now? How is your heart? How is your body? How is your pulse and your breath? What do you need right now? What do you want right now?
Mhm.
And to our listener, I would posit this question. Do you have an intensive care plan for the week, month, and season ahead? And before you need one, create one. Before I ask my question, I just want to offer something that I've been doing for the last several years. I got on Google Calendar and I started making sure that each day had a pink section in it. And the pink is what I'm now going to start calling intensive care. It's either a medical appointment, a healing appointment, a time for yoga nidra, a time for yoga, a time for resting, actual taking a nap in the bed rest. And I just want to ask you, Octavia, Faith, Anne, how do you plan for your own intensive care in this season?
You know, so there's the day to day. I know I'm going to practice yoga nidra or restorative yoga every day. So it's no longer planning for is, you know what, we don't plan to brush our teeth. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like, I don't plan to brush my teeth. It's just, I've been thinking a lot about what happens after we become deeply devoted to a practice. I'm like, oh, it's embodied. And so then there are things I do calendar, like similar to you. I once a week have like a deeper relationship to wellness where I go sit in like a salt room quietly or there's just space. It's nothing, right? Like it's not like I go get some service. It's just I don't overschedule myself anymore. And it has taken years for me to feel what overscheduling is for myself. And part of my intensive care plan is it includes my partner and my son and my girlfriends and my clients, meaning that I'm either inviting people to rest. You know, like some people, they're like, let's go out and do this. I'm like, come to my house and rest with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like a different frame. It's like like I had a slumber party with my friends the other day. Like I'm a very grown woman, right? But part of that was like, come to the house. Here's a cozy blanket. Here's nourishing food. And but we're collectively doing that so that the burden, if you will, of the responsibility of who's going to feed us, who's going to make sure the room's ready, all of that becomes more collective. And so I'm also thinking about, yes, my rest. Like I'm going to engage in rest practice every day, just like I'm going to brush my teeth at least one time a day. That's just going to happen. That's a given. And I know it's a given because I have practiced yoga nidra in hospital rooms, in some unlikely places because it's such a core of who I am. But it's also important for me to where I see, well, here's where I'm making space for myself to rest, to literally consider who else in my life I can extend that to, invite into that, share it with, and to actually do it, not to let it be an idea. Because I'm like, it is challenging for the individual to do these things, and I'm just thinking and feeling into a lot more how to normalize it and how to, like, we go out to dinner with folks. Can we rest with people?
That's a really nice way to look at it, actually.
It is important, right? So I think it's important to have the pink line on the calendar. And I think it's important for that pink line to also have some branches, right? Like, how else do I move this? Maya Angelou has this line, I come as one, I stand with 10,000. And she's talking about the ancestors that stand with her. And I often misquote that. I say, I come as one and I stand with 10,000, not as 10,000. And what I realize in my constant misquoting of that is that one way I've defined myself is, and with clear boundary, right? Like I'm a really boundary person, but I define myself like you're a part of myself. My sisters are a part of myself, right? Like, so when I'm thinking even about self care, it is beyond the individualized vessel of Octavia, Faith, and Raheem. And also, it's not at the expense of, right, this individual vessel that I am. And, I grew up very Christian and Baptist, and I've walked a few different paths, and I've ultimately come full circle to the real beauty of Christ consciousness. And my home church here in Atlanta is Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is every Sunday we say we're America's Freedom Church, right? It's the church that gave birth to Dr. Martin Luther King and many, many more
Wow.
who've led movement. It's an amazing faith community. And I say all that to say there's a Christian scripture that so much of how I think about what I do and feel into what I do is anchored in, and that is where two or three are gathered in my name, so am I. And one way I can translate that is where two or three are, there's the spirit, right? There's the sacred spirit, Holy Spirit, cosmic one, divine one. I would invite people to define that how it most serves them and resonates. But that scripture reminds me that when I rest with others, the spirit and the refuge and the revelation and the nourishment, whatever it is that rest has to give me or us, is amplified when there's more of us doing it together. You asked, how what's my intensive care plan? And part of my intensive care plan, it definitely includes myself. And, like my son, I do on Sundays, we do like sacred Sundays. He's 8. He takes a salt bath. I rub his feet, right? We listen to specific music. And it's like I make sure I'm really solid and grounded and cared for and nourished. And all the overflow of that, I'm so open and willing to share it.
Mm,
Because the real intensive care part is there's a team, there's a collective, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
What, if I may, the music that you listen to on Sacred Sundays, is it by chance really good gospel music?
you know what? For me and my son, it's actually because I was noticing that he sleeps differently on Sunday nights than Mondays, right? Like that teeing up
Yeah.
to go back to school. It's
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
like a 432 sound session, probably Jonathan Goldman.
Nice, right. 432
Yeah,
hertz.
it's something that brings him and us down a little because he get really activated. But you could watch Ebenezer online, and
Is that so?
you can. It's
Oh my god, how?
we have incredible, yeah. The Sunday services and the singing is incredible. I was reading something the other day that was talking about how music impacts dopamine, and then when you share it, and I was like, oh, this is what's been going on. This is what we've been doing, whether it's like a dance party or the sanctuary, like we are like, a drumming circle. I'm like, we know this, right? These are not laying down rest practices, though they're restorative practices. So
Yeah, yeah. The, gospel is literally one of the things that I do when I'm in a foreign city, and I'll go try and find the Baptist church
uh,
on Sunday, if
oh,
I'm there on a Sunday. Yeah, that's like a practice of mine.
I understand that. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can imagine. I'll look up how to find Ebenezer Church online on Sundays, so you don't have to do anything. But I wanna ask you one more question, 2.7. This one's important, I think, for all of us. Rest is protection.
Yes.
And I thought, I don't wanna read it. I wanna leave it for our listener to read the book. It's just so delicious. Please get your copy of this book. But protecting your energy with rest, I would like to talk about that. And then when you notice the shift you mentioned at the end of this section, to protect the shift.
I'm like, I
And I thought, wow, please elaborate, Octavia Faith Ann, please.
look, I'm looking at it. But you know what? I was doing some work with an energy healer, and I thought she's so dynamic and all these things and but then I was like, how are you in people's energetic field and not just how are you staying so vibrant and all these things? And I asked her, I was like, what do you do? How do you protect your energy? And she just named the basic things like water, rest. And I was a little disappointed. I wanted her to tell me what crystal, she wore. I wanted her to tell me something more elaborate about her care plan. And in that moment, I was thinking, I was like, right, this is just physiologically a rested body is vital, softer and stronger. And so rest is protection on that level. Like we know what it means. Like if you start to feel a tickle in your throat right now and you push through and you do all the things and you don't attend to it, then you do that the next day, you might likely get sick and be down days on end, right? Like I've done that. I'm speaking from experience. And if I feel a tickle in my throat and I go, oh, that's a tickle in my throat, let me hydrate more, let me do more restorative things, and also let me rest more, not less. I either don't get sick or if I do, the course is shorter. And so I'm clearly not a medical doctor, right? I'm speaking like as a human being and one who cares for others and has a family and also like a little kid and they pick up all the things, right? Just in that way, rest is protection for the physical body. It's like a first line of defense. But what this energy healer told me, she was like, well, you're just porous when you're tired. And it made me think about when I'm tired, like the things that can start to feel like a mental or emotional attack that normally I could just walk by and be like, oh, okay, look at that. That's interesting. It's like a force field. I'm using language like force field, but I'm like, we know what it feels like when we're physically tired, it's mentally fatigued or emotionally fatigued. It's like being kicked when you're down, like all the things that come at you, they have a more exponential negative impact. And then the other thing I'm talking about in rest is protection is the clarity of seeing self and then I'll say another that feels more right when we're rested. And even as I define myself as more than a single cell organism, I'm also really aware of when I'm like, I was just in that room and I don't feel inspired, motivated, or vibrant. I feel really depleted. Why? Right? Like I'm less willing to ignore when I'm like something or someone is siphoning my energy without my consent. When I am rested, I can even just ask the question when I'm tired. I'm just like, I don't know. It's like when I'm rested, I can be like, okay, let me pay attention. When I go into something rested, I was just in a place and I was speaking and doing something. I like to do things where I'm like, there's a real exchange. Like I give, I receive. You know what that feels like when you log off or you leave and you're like, we are drinking as we are pouring, right? Like that is happening. And so the rested body, the rested mind, the rested heart has more clarity of where they start and another ends or starts and can go, that over there does not serve me. And that's how rest is protection because, like, so I'm not in the field of that,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, I can feel that when I'm rested, how clear it is and how easy it is to not take things personally.
Yes.
So I feel that. And there's one line that really touched me here on page 71, midway. Make sure to practice for yourself as much as you offer practice to others. And you write in parentheses, which I highlighted, for you, this may be listening to yourself as much as you listen to and hold space for family, friends, and colleagues. And I looked at that. I laid down on my little biomat, turned it on, and I thought, okay, if one of my friends called me right this second and said they were having a really hard time, I would be on the phone on speaker, laying where I am, listening to this hard time and working it through with them diligently, carefully, lovingly. What if I were to do that to myself right now? And as I laid there, I asked, okay, is there anything happening that needs to be heard?
Hmm.
And sure enough, I had a bunch of stuff that I needed to listen to as though I were listening to a good friend of mine. And I went through this litany. It sometimes happens in meditation where I go through the list of like, what's, pardon my French, but what's a little bit fucked up right now? And then what do I need to do about it? And I went through that list. I sort of helped myself through it the way that I would help a friend. And it was so lovely, Octavia. I couldn't thank you enough. And I thought, I really want to remember to tell you that this is in parentheses, but it's absolutely a sacred instruction.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was with my acupuncturist the other day, and she was like, when I was in acupuncture training, they said, give a treatment, get a treatment. And I was like, all right, like 20 something years ago when I was in my first YTT yoga teacher training, my teacher said, teach a class, take a class. Take a class, teach a class. And when we just came back to that on page 71, I was like, all right, we remember, we forget. Because I remember that. And then just last week, I was reminded of it
Mm,
again.
so sweet.
Yeah.
It's just so sweet. I want to take a moment also to thank you for your friendship. Thank you for our mutual friend, Tracy Stanley, to thank her for introducing us. Another mutual friend, Alex L.
Yes.
I just want to honor these women
Yeah.
because you three have been like a major force field in my life. And I would like to read to our listener finally this last bit on the back cover from Alex L. If you're looking for an invitation into emotional, physical, and spiritual restoration, look no further. This book is a nudge to come back home to yourself. Alex L. Thank you, Octavia, Faith, and Raheem, for being here. Thank you for bringing us all back down to the ground when we're listening. Thank you for your practice, because it is affecting, benefiting all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.